Hello, and welcome to the Sparta Group podcast. We aim to provide you with up-to-date interviews and debate with opinion leaders in the health, well-being, rehabilitation and mental health space, from our studio or from conferences.
Hello and welcome to our podcast. My name's Carl of Sparta Health, and today we'll be taking a look at development. So to begin with, throughout our lives we go through so many changes. We all have to experience many different types of situations, events and milestones. And every single thing we go through causes us to grow or change slightly as an individual. That is what we mean by intellectual development. We have to develop in order to adapt to the world around us and to understand how we need to behave and act in different situations we may come across. We also have to develop physically. This happens throughout our whole entire lives. In fact, we change both physically and mentally every single day. We develop when we are in the womb, going from a minuscule egg and sperm to a whole human being. We then also develop as we go through childhood, when we go through puberty, and then as we turn into adults and eventually as an elderly person. Through all of these stages, we experience many different physical and mental developments, and our brain never stops developing. Anytime we learn something new, whether that be even just a simple fact we've heard from a friend or from the guy on the radio, it expands our knowledge and helps our brain develop just that little bit more. Now, most intellectual development occurs during childhood. Children expand their ability to think, reason, organize thoughts and information, make sense of the environment around them, and come up with ideas. They also have to learn a vast amount of vocabulary, with them knowing around 2,000 words by the time they are about 6 years old. Counting and gaining a basic understanding of numbers is something else they have to develop the skills for at a very young age. Then there are the skills that we do without even thinking. Now, we probably don't even remember the exact moment we learnt them. They are just things we knew to do from watching the world around us. For example, being able to understand what concepts such as yesterday, today and tomorrow are, and knowing what it means to take instructions. At the young age of 11 years old, a child should be able to have complete grasp of all the things mentioned just now, as well as being able to deal with more tricky concepts, such as harder mathematical equations, understanding basics about money, being able to read and grasping the concept of space and different types of boundaries. Then, between the ages of 12 and 18, children start thinking in an abstract way to solve problems, develop an understanding of how to debate and argue, form their own opinions and ideas, as well as a huge number of other skills. All of this development happens in such a short space of time, but they are all vital skills that are essential to be able to cope in the world and live a functional, good quality life. They are things that human beings have adapted to, and whilst they seem simple to us, it really is quite an extraordinary thing that we are able to learn all of these behaviours. Let's look at these stages of childhood intellectual development. The way a child's brain and intellectual ability develops can actually be put into 4 distinct groups. A scientist called Jean Piaget came up with a theory for a child's intellectual development. He saw intellect as something that was an active process, and that as a child develops, they change the way they think. The way they think develops from earlier thought structures they had, and it is the mistakes they make that allow them to change and grow. I'm sure we're all aware of how adventurous and mischievous children can be. Well, Piaget also noticed this, and in his theory, he sees that this adventurous nature is how children learn from their environment and understand the things around them. It is also through this exploration that they discover, for example, that things move, or that if they walk into something in front of them, then it might hurt, or they might fall. As they see this happen multiple times, for example, once they realize multiple different objects move when touched, then their intellectual capacity develops and they understand more about the concepts of the world and how things work. There are 2 ways in which a child learns and stores the new things they pick up about the environment around them. One way is if they see something that fits into a scheme that they have already learned, then they will categorize and relate it to this. The other way is that if they see or learn something that doesn't fit into one of those already made schemes, they will make a new scheme for it. Piaget came up with an overall theory for child intellectual development that categorizes everything they learn into 4 stages. The first is the sensorimotor stage, the second, the pre-operational stage, third, concrete operational stage, and the fourth, formal operation stage. Let's look at the sensorimotor stage. The sensorimotor stage is the first of Piaget's theory of intellectual development, which is between birth and 2 years old. As the name suggests, this is the period where your child learns how to use their senses and how to move and walk around. They learn how they can interact with the environment and the people around them, and that is why young babies are always grabbing things, trying to put things in their mouth, and just being a general nuisance when it comes to objects around the house. That's because they need to do this, as it allows them to get a basic grasp of how things look and feel. They also learn some basic motor skills and will shuffle, crawl, and eventually start to walk, although probably in quite a wobbly way to start off with. They'll also start to grasp the basics of motor skills of speech. When learning this, they will copy what they see their parents and family doing. They'll see how they form words and how they are walking around, and they will push themselves to copy that action. There are actually different stages of sensorimotor development. The first is reflective, and in this stage, children will respond to certain things as a reflex. So, if they see an object, such as I'm sure many of you parents have experienced, keys, then it will be their reflex to reach out for it and grab them. It won't be intentional, but it is what their brain tells them to do in order to help them get a feel of it and try to work out what the object is. Smiling is also a reflective action that children have in those first 2 years. The second stage is primary circular reactions, and these are movements such as thumb-sucking, kicking and smiling. They are things they do for their own enjoyment without even knowing it. Then the third is secondary circular reactions, and this is where those actions they make for their own enjoyment become more intentional as they begin to understand things about the world. So, for example, they might throw things around because they know it gets a response from their parents, or laugh when they do something they enjoy doing. The final stage is tertiary circular reactions, which usually occurs when the child is between 12 months and 18 months of age. And it is the stage where they are able to plan and coordinate their movement as a way of attempting a task. For example, if they want to go over to their parent and ask for a hug, or they want to get that toy that they want to play with. Next was the pre-operational stage. This is where your child really starts to pick up their ability to speak, and it is when they are able to understand and manipulate certain symbols. They can't, however, fully understand logic yet, and this occurs between the ages of 2 and 7. This stage is really dominated by the child learning how to speak, form sentences, understand what words mean, and begin being able to generally develop their language skills. It's also the stage where they're able to understand and use symbols. So, for example, they're able to use one object to represent another, like a hairbrush for a microphone. This is why children get very into playing games and pretending. They tend to be very animated when playing on their own or with friends, and everyone always says that there is no better imagination than that of a child. That's because they are grasping the basic of symbols and what things mean, and because they haven't got a complex and overcomplicated understanding of it. They're able to be very simple with things, which can allow them to be so creative. Next is the creative operational stage, which is where children learn and develop the way that they think so that it becomes more organised and rational. This occurs between the ages of 7 and 11 and is considered by Piaget to be one of the most significant developments and a real turning point in a child's intellectual growth. It's where they're able to get a grasp on logic and operations and are able to apply it to concrete physical things. For example, they're able to use it to understand conversation and to classify things by their similarities or differences. They also become able to arrange things in order of size or location and understand that there are certain things like numbers or objects that can be changed and reversed back into their original form. It's this stage where they start to learn more difficult things in school, and when they're tested with questions like, are there more red apples or green apples in the basket? They're able to focus on two things at once and use their basic grasp of knowledge to answer these sorts of questions. Finally, we come to the formal operational stage, which is the last stage in Piaget's theory of childhood intellectual development, and this occurs from 12 years and onwards. The main characteristic is that the child learns how to think in an abstract way. They're able to manipulate concepts and ideas in their heads in order to do a variety of things. The stage also involves gaining the ability to learn more difficult logic, such as hard math equations and scientific theories. They become able to predict outcomes and use their creativity, reasoning, and abstract thinking to problem solve. To spot the difference between the concrete operational stage and the formal operational stage, the best way is to see if the child still needs to draw or write things out in order to understand and come to a conclusion on something. If they have to do this, then they are still in the concrete stage, whereas if they're able to think problems through in their head, then this is formal. This stage is, simply put, the point where individuals start to develop more complex ways of thinking and can see past the basic principles and concepts of things in the world. They can apply all of their knowledge to form ideas, conclusions, and opinions. So, to wrap things up, you have everything you need to know now about development and the different intellectual development stages that we all went through as children. Our brains are truly wonderful things, and it is actually a miracle that it's able to do all of the things that it can to allow us to function as we do. When you actually stop to think about it, excuse the little pun there, it's just crazy to come to terms with how we are able to do so many different things and how we learn so much at such a young age. In the space of 18 years, we learn all the basics of how to get by in life, as well as what logic is, and growing our knowledge and intellect. Most of it is done by the time we are 12. Now you know the theory of development, and when you have a child of your own, if you don't already, then you will be able to notice each stage and when they are going through it. The brain really is a magnificent thing. Thank you so much for listening, and if you enjoyed this podcast episode, make sure to subscribe for more content like today. I'll see you next time.
At Sparta Group, we are keen to hear your thoughts about the topics discussed today. So please tweet us at Sparta_health or visit our website for more information and support.